Hello viewers and my dear students. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Dr. Zahida Begum, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, Government Degree College, Hayatnagar. Today I am going to take a class on international organizations. This topic is huge and vast chapter. So I will take one organization in this class and remaining organizations we will discuss in further classes. So, in this class we shall examine how in this emerging world there were calls for the reconstruction of international organization to cope with the various new challenges including the rise of United States powers. And next main point, the potential reform of the United Nations Security Council is an interesting case of the reform process and its difficulties. We then turn to India's involvement in the United Nations and its view of Security Council reforms. So let's start the introduction. An international organization is an organization with an international membership, scope, or presence. In international organization is a body that promotes voluntary cooperation and coordination between among its members. So, why international organization important or benefits of international organizations? International organizations are not the answer to everything, but they are important. International organizations help with matters of peace and war. They also help countries cooperate to make better living conditions for us all. Countries have conflicts and differences with each other. That does not necessarily mean they mean go to war to deal with their antagonists. They can instead discuss continuous issues and find peaceful solutions. Indeed, even though this is rarely noticed, most conflicts and differences are resolved without going to war. The role of international organization can be important in this context. So, an international organization is not a super state with authority over its members. It's created by and responds to states. It comes into being when states agree to its creation. Once created, it can help member states resolve their problems peacefully. International organizations are helpful into another way. Nations can usually see that there are some things they must do together. There are issues that are so challenging that they can only be dealt with everyone works together. For example, disease. Some diseases like corona can only be eradicated if everyone in the world cooperated in inoculating or vaccinating their populations. Or another example, take global warming and its effects. As atmospheric temperatures rise because of the spread of certain chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons CFCs, there is a danger that sea levels will also rise, thereby submerging many coastal areas of the world, including huge cities. Of course, each country can try to find its own solution to the effects of global warming. But in the end, a more effective approach is to stop the warming itself. This requires at least all of the major industrial powers to cooperate. Unfortunately, please concentrate this line, recognizing the need for cooperation and actually cooperating are two different things. Nations can recognize the need to cooperate but cannot always agree on how best to do so, how to share the costs of cooperating, how to make sure that the benefits of cooperating are justly divided, and how ensure that others do not break their end of the bargain and cheat on an agreement. An international organization can help produce information and ideas about how to cooperate. It can provide mechanisms, rules, and a bureaucracy to help members have more confidence that costs will be shared properly, that the benefits will be fairly divided, and that once a member joins an agreement, it will honor the terms and conditions of the agreement. We also find that the United Nations is generally regarded as the most important organization in today's world. In the eyes of many people all over the world, it is indispensable and represents the great hope of humanity for peace and progress. And then, why do we then need organizations like the United Nations? So, let us discuss later. And before going to United Nations, in international organizations there are some types, means majorly two types: intergovernmental organizations, it means IGOs. An IGO is an organization composed primarily of sovereign states or of other intergovernmental organization. IGO, from when governments make an agreements and bond together. For example, United Nations, European Union, and WTO, World Trade Organization. Another type of international organization is international non-governmental organizations, INGOs. Non-governmental organization means who operate independently, internally non-profit organization, non-affiliated with the government, nevertheless play an important role in international politics. For example, Indian Red Cross, Amnesty International, and Save the Children, Oxfam, IFAD, CARE, etc. So, the subject means only the subjected, if we divided or if we classified subject wide, there are also three types of international organizations. This is other form of organization. After the world war, after the not one world war, two world wars, many states in the world created international organizations with the different purposes. So purpose based classification is there, to act collectively and be more powerful in the defense of their common interests. So the purposeful types of international organizations are: number one, political purpose or political organizations, the United Nations, the organizations of American states, the African Union, the European Union. Economic purpose of organizations, the World Trade Organizations, the North American Free Trade Agreement NAFTA, The Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development, nothing but OECD, etc. And military purposes organizations, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, nothing but NATO, the Warsaw Pact, it is dissolved in 1991, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, the Australia, New Zealand, United States Security Treaty, and just like that. So, what is the role of international organizations? Their main points are the main roles are setting the international norms through technical analysis. And number two, supervisory role. There are in supervisory role there are some international organizations that perform certain supervisory functions like UN. Means the supervisory system of the UN is very weak, but in contrast the supervisory mechanism of the International Labour Organization is quite strong. And the European Union, together with a common commission and the Court of Justice, has a relatively strong supervisory mechanisms. And third one, technical assistance. An important role in the recent times is lending out technical cooperation to the member countries. And fourth one, negotiating and setting up multi-layer agreements. So the multi-layer agreements that are settled by the international organizations occur in sections like environment protections, development trade, and crime, human rights, etc. So what is the main steps to formation of the international organization? A constitutive act. The highest body of most international organizations is the General Assembly. And number three, most international organizations are governed by the Executive Council. Number four, as a rule, each international organization has standing secretariat headed by a Secretary General. In addition, auxiliary constitutive or auxiliary consultative bodies are usually established. And next one, the decisions of an overwhelming majority of international organizations are recommendations. And last one, international organizations contribute to the resolution of major international problems. Some international organizations give financial support to NGOs so that they can implement concrete programs or conduct research in which the international organizations are interested. This is the list of international organizations. So, as I said, there are many organizations. Today we will discuss only United Nations. United Nations is the first, means the evolution of United Nations. Before going to the evolution, what is the United Nations? An international organization designed to make the enforcement of international law, kindly focus, security, human rights, economic and social progress easier for countries around the world. This is the main theme of United Nations. There are four areas or pillars of the United Nations: peace and security, human rights, the rule of law, development. These four pillars of the United Nations. If we go the history of the United Nations, the First World War encouraged the world to invest in an international organization to deal with conflict. Many believed that such an organization would help the world to avoid war. As a result, the League of Nations was born 1919-20. It is the first general international organization. However, despite its initial success, it could not prevent the Second World War 1939 to 45. Many more people died and were wounded in this war than ever before. The United Nations was founded as a successor to the League of Nations. The United Nations is an intergovernmental organization that aims to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among the nations, achieve international cooperation, and be a center for harmonizing the actions of the nations. It is the largest, most familiar, most internationally represented, and most powerful intergovernmental organization in the world. The United Nations is headquartered on international territory in New York City at Manhattan, with its other main offices in Geneva, Nairobi, Vienna, Hague. The United Nations was established after Second World War with the aim of preventing future wars. As I said earlier, it is succeeding or successor the ineffective League of Nations. On 25th April 1945, the organization was step up through the signing of the United Nations Charter by 51 states. It tried to achieve what the League of Nations could not achieve between the two world wars. The United Nations objective is to prevent international conflict and to facilitate cooperation among the states. It was founded with the hope that it would act to stop the conflicts between states escalating into war. If war broke out, to limit the extent of hostilities. Furthermore, since conflicts often arose from the lack of social and economic development, the UN were intended to bring countries together to improve the prospects of social and economic development all over the world. So, the organizational structure of the United Nations is: number 1, the General Assembly; number 2, the Secretariat; number 3, the Security Council; and the number 4, the International Court of Justice; and number 5, the Economic and Social Council; and number 6, the Trusteeship Council. So, in General Assembly, by 2011 or till now, 195 countries in the world. The total countries in 195, 193 countries that are member state of the United Nations, and 2 countries that are non-member observer states. Now, these 2 countries are the Holy See and Palestine also. And then 5 permanent members: China, France, Russia, UK, United States. These permanent states were selected as permanent members as they were the most powerful immediately after the Second World War, and because they constituted the victories or victors in the war. So these all members in 193 members included almost all independent states. In this General Assembly, all members have 1 vote each. Main function: assessing member countries and deciding on the budget. The only organ where every member state is represented. Consists of committees, convenes annually in September. Special sessions can also held. And number 2, the Secretariat. As I said, the United Nations most visible public figure and the representative head is the Secretary General. The present Secretary General is Antonio Guterres. The United Nations consists of many different structures and agencies war and peace and differences between member states are discussed in the General Assembly as well as the Security Council. The Security Council is the United Nations most powerful organ. It deals with the threats to international peace and security. And next, the International Court of Justice. The principal judicial organ of the United Nations, based in The Hague, Netherlands, consists of 15 judges elected by the General Assembly and Security Council. Applies international law, not bound by precedents. No appeals can be made by parties to its judgment. So, next one, the Economic and Social Council. It is very important because central platform for debate and innovative thinking or sustainable development. The principal body for coordination, policy review, policy dialogue, and recommendations on economic issues or social issues or environmental issues, as well as for implementation of internationally agreed development goals. The ECOSOC engages a wide variety of stakeholders, policymakers, parliamentarians, academics, major groups, foundations, business, sector representatives, and registered more than 3,200 non-governmental organizations. The work of Council is guided by an issue-based approach. So, one more point. Social and economic issues are dealt with by many agencies, including the WHO, World Health Organizations, the United Nations, Developing UNDP, etc. I will discuss later. Next one, the Trusteeship Council, established to help ensure that trust territories were administered in the best interests of their inhabitants and the international peace and security. Authorized to examine and discuss reports from the administering authority on the political, economic, social, and educational advancement of the peoples of trust territories. In consultation with the administering authority to examine petitions from the undertake periodic and other special missions to trust territories. So, as I said, some specialized agencies in social and economic issues are deal with these agencies, including WHO, World Health Organization, and UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, and United Nations Human Rights Council, UNHRC, and UNICEF, United Nations Children Fund, and scientific and cultural organization like United Nations, UNESCO, and another also UNHCR, United Nations Commission for Refugees. So, this is the foundation of UN, 1945 to March 2006. So, some facts about United Nations. It provides food to 90 million people in 80 countries, vaccinates 58% of the world children, saving 3 million lives a year, assists over 38.7 million refugees and people feeling war, famine, or persecution, works with 193 countries to combat climate change and make development sustainable, keeps peace with 1,20,000 peacekeepers in 16 operations on 4 continents, fights poverty, helping improve the health and well-being of 420 million rural poor, protect and promotes human rights on site and through some 80 treaties or declarations, mobilizes 22 United States billion United States dollars in humanitarian aid to help people affected by emergencies. So these are all main agencies of United Nations: Food and Agriculture Organization, International Civil Aviation Organization, and UNESCO, International Labour Organization, and World Bank, International Monetary Fund, World Health Organization, and UNIDA also. So the United Nations has a peace force, the blue helmets, who were soldiers sent to the peace missions of the United Nations. These soldiers are voluntarily provided by the member states when a peace mission is launched. The UN is financed by voluntary contribution of its members and punishes the members that don't follow the rules of the organization or violating human rights. So what is the challenges? Challenges to the United Nations or limitations of the international organizations or issues, anything. What is the challenges? As I said before, reform of the United Nations after the Cold War. Reform and improvement are fundamental to any organization to serve the needs of a changing environment. The United Nations is no exception. In recent years, there have been demands for reform the old body. However, there is little clarity and consensus on the nature of reform. Two basic kinds of reforms face the United Nations: reform of the organization structure and processes, and a review of the issue that fall within the jurisdiction of the organization. Almost everyone is agreed that both aspects of reforms are necessary. What they cannot agree on is precisely what is to be done, how it is to be done, and when it is to be done. On the reform of structures and processes, the biggest discussion has been on the functioning of the Security Council. Related to this has been the demand for an increase in the United Nations Security Council's permanent and non-permanent membership, so that the realities of contemporary world politics are better reflected in the structure of the organization. In particular, there are proposals to increase membership from Asia, Africa, and South America. Beyond this, the United States and other Western countries want improvements in the United Nations budgetary procedures and its administration. On the issues to be given greater priority or to be brought within the jurisdiction of United Nations, some countries and experts want the organization to play a greater or more effective role in the peace and security missions, while others want its role to be confined to development and humanitarian work, that is, health, education, environment, population control, human rights, gender, and social justice. Let us look at both sets of reforms with an emphasis on reform of the structures and processes. The UN was established in 1945, immediately after the Second World War. The way it was organized and the way it functioned reflected the realities of world politics after the Second World War. After the Cold War, those realities are different. Here are some challenges that have occurred. The Soviet Union has collapsed. The United States is the strongest power. The relationship between Russia, the successor to the Soviet Union, and the US is much more cooperative. China is fast emerging as a great power, and India also growing rapidly. The economies of Asia are growing at an unprecedented rate. Many new countries have joined the United Nations as they became independent from the Soviet Union or former communist states in Eastern Europe. A whole new set challenges confronts the world, means example, geo genocide, civil war, ethnic conflict, terrorism, nuclear proliferation, climate change, environmental degradation, epidemics, like that. In this situation, in 1989, as the Cold War was ending, the question facing the world was, is the United Nations doing enough? Is it equipped to do what is required? What should it what should it be doing, and how? What reforms are necessary to make it work better? For the past decade and a half, member states have been trying to find satisfactory and practical answers to these questions. So, reform of structures and process. While the case for reform has widespread support, getting agreement on what to do is difficult. Let us examine the debate over reform of the United Security Council in 1992. The General Assembly adopted a resolution. The resolution reflected three main complaints. Please focus on that. Number one, the Security Council no longer represents contemporary political realities. And number two, its decisions reflect only Western values and interests and are dominated by a new or few powers. Number three, it lacks equitable representation. In view of these growing demands for the restructuring of the United Nations, on January 1st, 1997, the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan initiated an inquiry into how the United Nations should be reformed. How, for instance, should new Security Council members be chosen? In the years since then, the following are just some of the criteria that have been proposed for a new permanent and non permanent members of the Security Council. A new member, it has been suggested, should be major economic power, a major military power, a substantial contributor to the United Nations budget, a big nation in terms of its population, a nation that respects democracy and human rights, a country that would make the Council more representative of the world's diversity in terms of geography, economic systems, and cultural. So, clearly, each of these criteria has some validity. Governments saw advantages in some criteria and disadvantages in others depending on their interests and aspirations. Even if they had no desire to be members themselves, countries could see that the criteria was problematic. How big an economic or military power did you have to be to qualify for Security Council membership? What level of budget contribution would enable a state to buy its way into the council? Was a big population an asset or a liability for a country trying to play a bigger role in the world? If respect for democracy and human rights was the criteria, countries with excellent records would be in the line to be members. But would they effective as council members? Furthermore, how was the matter of representation to be resolved? Did we equitable representation in geographical terms mean that there should be one seat each from Asia, Africa, and Latin America and the Caribbean? Should the representation, on the other hand, be by regions or subregions rather than continents? Why should the issue of equitable representation is decided by the geography? Why not by levels of economic development? Why not, in other words, give more seats to members of the developing world? Even here, there are difficulties. The developing world consists of countries at many different levels of development. What about culture? Should different cultures or civilizations be given representation in a more balanced way? How does one divide the world by civilization or cultures given that nations have so many cultural streams within their borders? A related issue was to change the nature of membership altogether. Some instead, for instance, that the veto power of the five permanent members be abolished. Many perceived the veto to be in conflict with the concept of democracy and sovereign equality in the United Nations and thought that the veto was no longer right or relevant. In the Security Council, there are 5 permanent members and 10 non permanent members. The Charter gave the permanent members a privileged position to bring about stability in the world after the Second World War. The main privileges of the 5 permanent members are permanency and the veto power. The non-permanent members serve for only 2 years at a time and give way after that period to newly elected members. A country cannot be re-elected immediately after completing the term of 2 years. The non-permanent members are elected in a manner so that they represent all continents of the world. Most importantly, the non permanent members do not have the veto power. What is the veto power? In taking decisions, the Security Council proceeds by voting. All members have one vote. However, the permanent members can vote in a negative manner so that even if all other permanent and non permanent members vote for a particular decision, any permanent member's negative vote can shell the decision. This is negative vote is the veto. While there has been a move to abolish or modify the veto system, there is also a realization that the permanent members are unlikely to agree to such a reform. Also, the world may not be ready for such a radical step even though the Cold War is over. Without the veto, there is the danger, as in 1945, that the great powers would lose interest in the world body, that they would do what they pleased outside it, and that without their support and involvement, the body would be ineffective. The question of membership is a serious one. In addition, though, there are more substantial issues before the world. As the United Nations completed 60 years of its existence, the heads of all the member states met in September 2005 to celebrate the anniversary and review the situation. The leaders in this meeting decided that the following steps should be taken to make an United Nations more relevant in the changing context. Creation of a peace building commission. Number 2, acceptance of the responsibility of the international community in case of failures of national government to protect their own citizens from atrocities. Number 3, establishment of human rights council. Number 4, agreements to achieve the millennium development goals. Number 5, condemnation of terrorism in all its forms and manifestation. And next one, creation of the democracy fund. And the next one, an agreement to wind up the trusteeship council. It is not hard to see that these are equally contentious issues for the United Nations. What should a peace building commission do? There are any number of conflicts all over the world. Which ones should be intervene in? Is it possible to even desirable to it to intervene? In each and every conflict. Similarly, what is the responsibility of the international community in dealing with atrocities? what are the human rights and who should determine the level of human rights violations and the course of action to be taken when they violated, given that so many countries are still part of the developing world. How realistic is it for United Nations to achieve an ambitious set of goals such as those listed in the Millennium Development Goals? Can there be agreement on a definition of terrorism? How shall the United Nations use funds to promote democracy and so on? So, now I am going with United Nations Development Action Framework in India or India and the United Nations reforms. So, as we said, the reforms are making drastic changes in United Nations. So, what is the part of India? India has supported the restructuring of the United Nations on several grounds. It believes that a strengthened and revitalized UN is desirable in a changing world. India also supports an enhanced role for the United Nations in promoting development and cooperation among states. India believes that development should be central to the United Nations agenda as it is a vital precondition for the maintenance of international peace and security. One of India's major concerns has been to composition of the Security Council, which has remained largely static while the United Nations General Assembly membership has expanded considerably. India considered that this has harmed the representative character of the Security Council. It is also argues that an expanded council with more representation will enjoy greater support in the world community. We should keep in mind that the membership of the United Nations Security Council was expanded from 11th to 15th in 1965, but there was no change in the number of permanent members. Since then, the size of the council has remained stationary. The fact remains that the overwhelming majority of the United Nations General Assembly members now are developing countries. Therefore, India argues that they should also have a role in shaping the decisions in the Security Council with affect them. India supports an increase in the number of both permanent and non-permanent members. Its representatives have argued that the activities of the Security Council have greatly expanded in the past few years. The success of the Security Council's actions depends upon the political support of the international community. Any plan for the restructuring of the Security Council should therefore be broad based. For example, the Security Council should have more developing countries in it. Not surprisingly, India itself also wishes to be a permanent member in a restructured United Nations. India is the second most populous country in the world, comprising almost one-fifth of the world population. Moreover, India is also the world's largest democracy. India has participated virtually all of the initiatives of the United Nations. Its role in the United Nations peacekeeping efforts is long and substantial one. The country's economic emergence on the world stage is another factor that perhaps justifies India's claim to a permanent seat in the Security Council. India's claim to a permanent seat in the Security Council, India has also made regular financial contributions to the United Nations and never faltered on its payments. India is aware that permanent membership of the Security Council also has the symbolic importance. It signifies symbolic a country's growing importance in world affairs. This greater status is an advantage to a country in the conduct of its foreign policy. The reputation for being powerful makes you more influential. Despite India's wish to be a permanent veto wielding member of the United Nations, some countries question its inclusion. Neighboring Pakistan, with relations or with which India has troubled relations, is not the only country that is reluctant to see India become a permanent veto member of the Security Council. Some countries, for instance, are concerned about India's nuclear weapons capabilities. Other, Others think that it's difficult or the difficulties with Pakistan will make India ineffective as a permanent member. Yet others feel that if India is included, then other emerging powers will have to be accommodated, such as Brazil, Germany, Japan, perhaps even South Africa, whom they oppose. There are those who feel that Africa and South America must be represented in any expansion of the permanent membership, since those are the only continents not to have representation in the present structure. Given these concerns, it may not be very easy for India or anyone else to become permanent member of the United Nations in near future. So as a conclusion, the UN, United Nations in a unipolar world. Among the concerns about the reform and restructuring of the United Nations has been the hope of some countries that changes could help the United Nations cope better with the unipolar world. The unipolar world in which the US was the most powerful country without any serious rivals. Can the United Nations serve as a balance against US dominance? Can it help maintain a dialogue between the rest of the world and the United States and prevent America from doing whatever it wants? United States power cannot be easily checked, first of all, with the disappearance of the Soviet Union. The US stands as the only superpower. Its military and economic power allow it to ignore the United Nations or any other international organization. Secondly, within the United Nations, the influence of the United States is considerable. As the single largest contributor to the United Nations, the United States has unmatched financial power. The fact that the United Nations is physically located with the United States territory gives Washington additional sources of influence. The United States also has many nationals in the United Nations bureaucracy. In addition, with its veto power, the United States can stop any moves that it finds annoying or damaging to its interests or the interests of its friends and allies. The power of the United States and its veto within the organization also ensure that Washington has a considerable degree of say in the choice of Secretary General of the United Nations. The United States can and does use this power to split the rest of the world and to reduce opposition to its policies. The United Nations not therefore a great balance to the United States. Nevertheless, in a unipolar world in which the United States is dominant, the United Nations can and has served to bring the United States and the rest of the world into discussions over various issues. United States leaders, in spite of their frequent criticism of the United Nations, do see the organization as serving a purpose of bringing together over 193 nations in dealing with the conflict and social and economic development. As for the rest of the world, the United Nations provide an arena in which it is possible to modify United States attitude and policies, while the rest of the world is rarely. rarely against the Washington. And while it is virtually impossible to balance United States power, the United Nations does power is space within which argument against specific United States attitudes and policies are heard, and compromises and concessions can be shaped. The United Nations is an imperfect body, but without it, the world would be worse off. Given the growing connections and links between societies and issues, what we often call interdependence, it is hard to imagine how more than 7 billion people would live together without an organization such as an United Nations. Technology promises to increase planetary interdependence, and therefore the importance of the United Nations will only increase. Peoples and governments will have to find ways of supporting and using the United Nations and the other international organizations in ways that are consistent with their own interest and the interests of the international community more broadly. So, thank you. We will discuss another organization in next class. Until then, thank you. Thank you very much.